I've worked as a security guard for nearly 10 years now, and in that time I've seen my share of odd things. You get used to the monotony. Long hours of watching empty corridors, scanning rows of silent monitors, and making rounds through dark, deserted buildings. It's a quiet, lonely job most of the time, and for the most part, that's what I liked about it. But this story isn't about the quiet times. This is about the one shift that changed everything for me. It was about a year ago when I was assigned to a new post. An old office building downtown that had been mostly abandoned for years. The city had been using it as storage for some municipal records, but other than that, the place was a ghost town. There were rumors about it, of course. Some of the other guards who had worked there talked about how the building had a weird vibe, how they felt like they were being watched. A couple even said they heard strange noises during their shifts. But I wasn't one to believe in that sort of thing. I chalked it up to creaky floors and drafty windows in a building that had seen better days. The first few weeks were uneventful. I worked the night shift, patrolling the empty hallways, checking doors and watching the cameras. The building was massive, with long corridors lined with empty offices, the occasional flickering light casting eerie shadows as I made my rounds. But even then, I never felt uncomfortable. It was just another job, another place to pass the hours until the sun came up. That all changed one night when I noticed something strange on the security monitors. It was around 2 a.m., the dead of night when the building was completely silent. I was sitting in the security office, watching the cameras when I saw something flicker across one of the screens. It was subtle, barely noticeable at first. A movement in the corner of the frame, just outside one of the storage rooms on the third floor. I sat up, squinting at the monitor, but whatever it was had already disappeared. I figured it was probably just a trick of the light, maybe a reflection or a glitch in the camera. But then it happened again. This time, I saw it more clearly. Something moving quickly, just out of view, like a shadow darting across the hallway. My heart rate picked up a little, but I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a bird had gotten into the building or some animal. That wasn't uncommon in old places like this. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I decided to check it out. Grabbing my flashlight and keys, I headed up to the third floor. As I stepped out of the elevator, the familiar sound of the building's old creaking structure greeted me. The air was thick with dust, and the silence was oppressive, broken only by the soft buzz of the lights overhead. I made my way down the long hallway, my footsteps echoing off the walls. As I approached the storage room where I'd seen the movement, I slowed down, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. When I reached the door, I found it closed and locked, just as it should have been. I hesitated for a moment, then unlocked it with my key. The door creaked open, revealing rows of shelves stacked with boxes and old filing cabinets. The room smelled of mildew and paper that had been left to rot over the years. I shone my flashlight around, searching for any sign of movement, but the room was still. Nothing was out of place. No signs of anyone who shouldn't be there. I walked further in, my boots scuffing against the dusty floor, feeling a slight chill in the air despite the stifling heat outside. That's when I heard it. A faint sound, barely audible at first, like someone shuffling or a soft scraping against the floor. My heart skipped a beat, and I froze, listening. The noise seemed to be coming from the far end of the room, near a stack of old filing cabinets. I moved slowly toward the sound, my flashlight shaking slightly in my hand. "Hello," I called out, my voice echoing back to me. "Is anyone there?" No answer, just the same faint shuffling noise, growing a little louder now. I kept walking, the beam of my flashlight bouncing off the rows of dusty boxes and cabinets, but I didn't see anything. Then, just as I rounded the corner of one of the shelves, the noise stopped. Dead silence. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I didn't know what I was expecting to find. Maybe a rat or some vagrant who had somehow snuck into the building. But there was nothing. Just the quiet hum of the lights overhead and the thick, dusty air. I took a step closer to the filing cabinets where the noise had been coming from, my flashlight illuminating the rows of drawers. As I reached out to pull one open, a sudden gust of air hit me from behind. It wasn't a breeze. It was more like someone had exhaled right behind me. I spun around, my flashlight flashing wildly across the room, but there was no one there. My heart was racing now, my pulse pounding in my ears. I backed away slowly, keeping the light trained on the spot where I thought I'd felt the breath. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened, but nothing about it felt right. That was when I noticed something else. The door to the storage room, which I had left wide open, was now closed. I don't remember running back to the door, but I must have, because the next thing I knew, I was grabbing the handle and yanking it open. The hallway outside was just as I had left it. Empty, silent, completely normal. I stumbled out of the room, my hand shaking, and slammed the door behind me. I locked it as fast as I could, my breath coming in short, panicked bursts. I stood there for a moment, leaning against the wall, trying to calm myself down. It didn't make any sense. None of it did. I hadn't seen anyone, but I'd felt something, and I couldn't explain that gust of air. My rational mind was scrambling for answers, but none of them made sense. I decided to head back to the security office and check the footage again. Maybe I'd missed something on the cameras, or maybe there was a logical explanation for what had just happened. But when I got back to the office and pulled up the footage, my stomach dropped. The camera that had been pointing at the storage room door, the one where I'd seen the flicker of movement earlier, had gone black. The footage cut out just a few seconds before I'd arrived on the third floor. There was no record of me walking up to the door, no record of anything that had happened in the past 20 minutes. It was like that part of the night had been erased. I sat there, staring at the blank screen, feeling a deep, gnawing dread settle in my gut. Something wasn't right, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't the first time something strange had happened in the building. There had been little things I hadn't paid attention to at the time. Lights flickering in hallways where they shouldn't have, doors that were locked one minute and open the next, the feeling of being watched even when I knew I was alone. I had brushed all of it off, told myself it was just the quirks of an old building. Nothing to worry about. But now, after what had just happened in that storage room, I couldn't ignore it anymore. For the next few nights, I was on edge. Every creak of the floor, every flicker of the lights set my nerves on fire. I stopped making rounds on the third floor altogether, avoiding the storage room like the plague. I didn't care if it cost me my job. I wasn't going back there. But whatever it wasn't done with me yet. A week after the incident, I was sitting in the security office again, watching the cameras when I saw it. This time, it wasn't just a flicker of movement. It was clear as day. Someone was standing in the hallway outside the storage room. It was just out of range of the camera, so I couldn't see them clearly, but there was no mistaking the shape of a person standing in the shadows just beyond the door. My blood ran cold as I watched, frozen in place, unable to tear my eyes from the screen. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, waiting, watching. I knew I should call someone. My boss, the police, anyone. But I couldn't bring myself to pick up the phone. There was a part of me that didn't want to know what would happen if I acknowledged it. So I just sat there, staring at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest. After what felt like hours, the figure finally moved. It didn't walk away, didn't disappear into the shadows. It just seemed to melt into the darkness, fading from view like smoke dissipating in the air. 1 minute it was there, the next it was gone. I quit the next day. I didn't give notice, didn't ask for an explanation. I just walked out and never looked back. But whatever was in that building, I didn't want any part of it. And even now, a year later, I still don't know what it was. Maybe there's a logical explanation, something to do with the building's age, its structure, its history. But deep down, I know the truth. Some things are better left unseen.